Thanks for that introduction, and glad everybody came back after that short break. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about golf and home lawns, so I talked to those of you that are groundskeepers in here, and I'll be honest with you, those of us in the States probably know less about hybrid systems than you do, but I'm excited to present at least one of our studies as we tried to learn more about it. So we'll jump right in here. So a little bit, obviously, those of you that are familiar with hybrid systems, you know, the stitching or fibers in the soil typically help to preserve the crown of the plant under intense traffic. That prevents some of the soil compaction, some of the kind of what we'll call a bird bathing effect, right, where the soil compacts down, from repeated foot traffic, and then you can't regrow grass in those areas, and so then that becomes very problematic for the athletic field end users, and so that's something that they don't like. It's unsightly for the field managers, and so that's problematic. So with advances in technology, there's been a change in hybrid technology. So hybrids, are still classified as a mixture of synthetic fibers as well as natural turf growing together, but now we've kind of got two classifications inside of that. So we've got the permanent ones, which is where the fibers are sown into the root zone, and many of you are very familiar with those, and then they extend above the surface into the canopy, and those are permanent. They're there for as long as you have that root zone mixture. Mat systems are kind of a newer technology. Again, the fibers are sewn into a mat, which is typically rolled out over the surface, and then that's secured over the soil surface by either like top dressing a material in, or in some cases they stake it down a little bit, and then the grass grows and seeded into that mat system. So in the US, a lot of the stadiums, probably much like over here, are multi-use, so that it's not uncommon to have a concert or something like that. And then there's a need to resod a certain area of that athletic field. Well, with the permanent systems, they really struggle with that because obviously you can't just sod over that. And so there's preference, preferably if you're going to do a hybrid system, to a mat type product where they could actually go in, cut that out, and put in fresh sod if they need to. So here's what a mat system kind of looks like up close. You can see, obviously it's basically like a synthetic turf. It's less dense, and so there's less, or there's area there where you can top dress in your root zone material and then grow your grass in it as well. Now, compared to older systems, the original mat type systems that came out had a closed backing. It was very high surface hardness, and so that drove away a lot of the American football interest in the fact that there's a lot of collisions with the head hitting the ground. And so those original mat systems, they were very hard, very firm, and so that caused some safety concerns. These newer systems, they have a backing that will degrade over time in between, and so that's kind of re-spurred interest in the United States for American football use as far as an option for field managers. So in this study, we wanted to look at two different systems, the Hero hybrid system and the Eclipse. And again, these are permeable mat backings, and then you'd have the natural grass that would grow through them. So the Eclipse system had a primary backing. It's kind of an open weave polypropylene mesh. And then the fibers attached to that, and they extended up, and there was 40 millimeters that were buried in the sand, and then the rest extended through. The Hero system, again, had a mat, but it was attached through the system with knots. So it's a little bit different attachment system than the weave system. And it had 45 millimeters of fibers that were buried in the root zone. And so those were kind of the stabilizations there. And then we had a natural grass surface that was just pure natural grass. So we conducted this study at 3 different locations, and I'll show the map of the US and where they were. We did Kentucky bluegrass on them. That's the preferred athletic field grass for athletic field managers in the United States. They like that rhizomes, obviously, to growing together. It's also got a little bit less of a disease issue for the vastly different climate zones that we tested this across. So we wanted, a grass that wouldn't die out due to the heat or some of the diseases that would hit in some of the spots where we tested this. So we chose Kentucky bluegrass. We conducted our simulated traffic October through November. That's kind of during the American football season. It's in the fall. And then again, our three treatments were the Hero hybrid system with the natural turf, Eclipse with the natural turf, and then natural Kentucky bluegrass growing by itself. So here's a picture of the plots installed. You can kind of see how they're out there with the replicated, and they're all raised up to the same level, so they had the same amount of root zone material there. And then that was growing on a sand base, so it had the same drainage underneath all of those with sand top dressing in there for the actual root zone material inside of the fibers as well. So here's our locations with the stars. So again, the University of Tennessee was one location, Michigan State University, and then that's Iowa State where I am. And so what's unique about these locations here, obviously, is each of these has vastly different growing conditions. So down here is much more hot and humid. Here's a little bit of probably the most extreme of the climates as far as that goes, because we don't have any water or anything like that to protect us. So we see swings of very hot, humid summers to very, very cold, negative temperatures in the winter. And then Michigan State had a little bit better climate as far as that goes for growing things. So a little bit about how we actually took the data and tracked this. The big thing that we did was we based turfgrass performance with digital image analysis. So of course, take a digital picture, run it through a software system, scan out all the green pixels, and that tells you kind of what the green turf cover was there on that. What was interesting was when we took the initial pictures, you really don't pick up many of the green fibers at all in the hybrid system, so you're truly seeing the green turfgrass fibers there. So that gave us an idea of green cover. We also did a Clegg impact hammer, or Clegg impact surface tester. So this device tells us surface hardness. Many of you definitely are probably familiar with that. This is a hugely important tool, again, with head injuries and concerns with American football. This is what they're using to kind of generate safety data and get an idea of how safe a playing surface is. The National Football League has set out a maximum of a surface hardness of 100 GMAX with this device in order to play a game on it. And so we're comparing everything to levels of 100. We also had one other device. We looked at rotational resistance, kind of an idea of, all right, what would be the potential resistance? So could you make an athletic move on this turf? So here's how we simulate our athletic field traffic. I will see, I've got a video in here. We'll see if it plays, hopefully. There we go. So there it is. That's our device. It's a modified Procore in slow motion. Again, it does a good job, as you can see there, of tearing up the leaf tissue as well as compacting the soil. And so 2 passes of this, we feel like, and there's been some studies that have shown that it simulates one American football game as far as the foot traffic goes. It's got the little cleats underneath there. And it's a fairly firm surface as far as it generates some of our large athletes that we have in American football stomping on the ground, pushing on another one. So it's a pretty aggressive force and does a nice job of beating up the soil. It's also very loud, so good thing the volume was turned down. So anyway, we'll jump right into the results here. I'm presenting this. So one of the significant things that we found was with increasing simulated traffic events or games, we saw a decrease in turf cover. This is not shocking. Everybody knows this. You concentrate foot traffic in one spot, right? You're going to wear out the grass no matter what's there. And so this bar here is the percent green turf cover on the y-axis. Here's our simulated traffic events across the x-axis. And then here's our different locations. So here's the University of Tennessee. They have a much more mild winter-type conditions or fall. So this was still Kentucky bluegrass growing weather. So they probably saw a little bit of recovery after each of their traffic events. Whereas Iowa State and Michigan State, basically, that plant was worn away. It wasn't able to recover back just because of the climate conditions. And so, again, you see a drop-off in turf cover at every location. It was just more severe at those more northern schools. Both Michigan State and the University of Tennessee did not see any difference between any of the treatments. So this is kind of a good picture here of the different treatments, and they didn't see any difference in percent cover between treatments throughout any point in the trial. At Iowa State, I'm not sure why we had such different results, but we did. And what we saw was, again, both hybrid systems had significantly higher cover at the end of the study than what the control did, or the non-hybrid system. So again, that's probably protecting the plant a little bit more, the hybrid shows in this situation, than other locations. And then we look at surface hardness, because again, this is a really big deal in athletics, especially with American football. And so here's Michigan State's location. Each location had differences, so I'll present each of them, but it's kind of the same story. And so we can see here 4 of the 6 dates, they had differences in hardness. And what you can see here, especially several of the early dates here, we definitely see the control having a lower surface hardness than what we see the hybrid systems. And so, what's interesting here is we start to pick up a trend here where the hero actually starts to become similar, statistically at least, with the control for surface hardness. This is Iowa State's location. Again, we didn't see as many dates that were significant for hardness between treatments, but again, we had a couple. Again, the control is the softest surface, less surface hardness than what the hybrid systems were. And then finally, Tennessee, at every single date, they had differences in hardness. When we went back and reanalyzed and kind of pooled the locations, what we did notice was that across all treatments, the Eclipse typically had the highest surface hardness, followed by the hero and then the control. What about peak shear resistance, or that rotational resistance, as we talk about that? At the beginning at Michigan State, no difference between treatments. At the end, again, they had actually the control had the lowest shear resistance. Kind of makes sense. Probably there was nothing there to help stabilize that root zone, especially with the loss of turf cover. This is Iowa State again, and Tennessee here as well. We've got the control having less resistance than what the hybrid systems did. So they're helping reinforce kind of the surface there and holding there. So what's the take-home message here? All plots lost cover. After 25 simulated traffic events, Iowa State was the only location to see differences between treatments. We never saw anything above a 100 GMAX, so that old, the mat system is going to be a significantly harder. Safety concerns, we're not seeing that with this newer systems that we tested. In future research, we need to look at recovery. We also need to learn more about management. We're so far behind with removing the grass and how do we regenerate it, things like that. And so, again, we have a lot to learn on that. So with that, I will open it up for questions, if anybody has any. If not, I appreciate it. I'll be around.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah.